Shalom, and today we're reading 2 Samuel chapter 18. And Dod mustered the people who were with him, and set commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds over them. And Dod sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, and 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. And the sovereign said to the people, I shall certainly go out with you too. But the people answered, Do not go out, for if we flee away, they would not set heart upon us. Even if half of us die, they would not heart upon us. For now 10,000 are like us. Therefore it is better for you to support us from the city. And the sovereign said to them, That which is good in your eyes I do. And the sovereign stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by the hundreds and by the thousands. And the sovereign ordered Joab, and Abishai, and Ittai, saying, Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. And all the people heard when the sovereign gave all the commanders orders concerning Absalom. So the people went out into the field to meet Yashrael, and the battle was in the forest of Ephraim. And the people of Yashrael were smitten there before the servants of Dod. And the slaughter there that day was great, 20,000. And the battle there was scattered over the face of all the land, and the force devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. And when Absalom met the servants of Dod, Absalom was riding on a mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught hold in the terebinth. And he was suspended between the Shemaim and the earth, while the mule which was under him passed by. And a certain man saw it and informed Joab, and said, Look, I saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree. And Joab said to the man who informed him, Now look, you saw, and why did you not strike him to the earth there? Then I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. But the man answered Joab, Though I were to receive 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the son of the sovereign, because in our hearing the sovereign commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Take heed on who you go against the youth against Absalom. Otherwise I would have been untrue to my own life, for no matter is hidden from the sovereign, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. And Joab said, Let me not waste time here with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart, while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor went around and struck Absalom and put him to death. And Joab blew the shofar, and the people returned from pursuing Yashrael, for Joab had held the people back. And they took Absalom and threw him into a large pit in the forest, and heaped a very large pile of stones over him, and all Yashrael fled, each one to his tent. And Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up a monument for himself, which is in the sovereign's valley. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the monument after his own name. And to this day it is called Absalom's monument. And Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, Please let me run and take the news to the sovereign, for Yahu'ah has avenged him and his enemies. But Joab said to him, You are not the man to take the news today, but you shall take the news another day. But today you do not take news, because the sovereign's son is dead. And Joab said to the Cushite, Go inform the sovereign what you have seen. And the Cushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. And Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said again to Joab, And whatever might be, please let me also run after the Cushite. And Joab said, Why would you run, my son? There is no news to bring you reward. And whatever it might be, he said, Let me run. So he said to him, Run. And Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain, and passed the Cushite. Now Dod was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up to the roof over the gate, to the wall, and lifted his eyes and looked, and saw a man running alone. So the watchman called out and told the sovereign. And the sovereign said, If he is alone, there is news in his mouth. And he came nearer and nearer. And the watchman saw another man running. And the watchman called out to the gatekeeper and said, See, a man running by himself. And the sovereign said, This one is also bringing news. And the watchman said, I see the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, son of Zadok. And the sovereign said, This is a good man, and he comes with good news. And Ahimaaz called out and said to the sovereign, Peace! Then he bowed down with his face to the earth before the sovereign and said, Blessed be Yahu'ah, your Elohah, who has surrendered the men who raised their hand against my master, the sovereign. And the sovereign said, Peace to the young man, to Absalom. And Ahimaaz answered, When Joab sent the sovereign's servant and me, your servant, I saw a great crowd, but I did not know why. And the sovereign said, Turn aside and stand here. And turn aside, and he stood. And see, the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, Receive news, my master, the sovereign, for Yahu'ah has avenged you this day, all those who rose against you. And the sovereign said to the Cushite, Peace to the young man, to Absalom. And the Cushite answered, Let the enemies of my master the sovereign, and all who rise against you for evil, be as that young man is. And the sovereign was shaken, and went up to the room over the gate, and wept. And as he went, he said this, Oh, my son, Absalom, my son, Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son. Chapter 19. And it was reported to Joab, See, the sovereign is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the deliverance that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard on that day, saying, The sovereign has been grieved for his son. And the people stole back into the city that day, as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. And the sovereign covered his face, and the sovereign cried out with a loud voice, Oh, my son, Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son! And Joab came into the house to the sovereign, and said, Today you have put to shame all your servants who today have saved your life, and the lives of your sons and daughters, and the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, by loving those who hate you, and by hating those who love you. And you have made it clear today that you have neither commanders nor servants. For today I know that if Absalom had lived, and all of us had died today, then it would be right in your eyes. And now rise and go out and speak to the heart of your servants. For I swear by Yahu'ah, if you do not go out, not one passes the night with you, and that it is worse for you than all the evil that has come upon you from your youth until now. So the sovereign rose and sat in the gate. And they told all the people, saying, Look, the sovereign is sitting in the gate. And all the people came before the sovereign. As for Yashrael, they had fled, each one to his tent. And it came to be that all the people were contending throughout all the tribes of Yashrael, saying, "The sovereign delivered us from the hand of the enemies. He rescued us from the hands of the the Philistines. And now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. And now, why are you silent about bringing back the sovereign?" And Sovereign God sent to Zadok and Abiathar the priest, saying, "Speak to the elders of Yahu'ah, saying, Why are you the last to bring the sovereign back to his house, since the words of all Yashrael have come to the sovereign to his house? You are my brothers, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the sovereign? And say to Amasa, Why not my bone and my flesh? Yahu'ah, do so to me, and more also, if you not commander of the army before me all the days in place of Yoab." Thus he swayed the hearts of all the men of Yahu'ah as one man, so that they sent to the sovereign, saying, "Return in you all your servants." So the sovereign returned and came to the Yarden, and Yahu'ah came to Gilgal, to go to meet the sovereign, to bring the sovereign over the Yarden. And Shimei, son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Barum, hastened and came down with the men of Yahu'ah to meet sovereign God. And with him were 1,000 men of Benjamin, and Seba the servant of the house of Shaul, and his 15 sons, and 20 servants with him. And they rushed over the Yarden before the sovereign. And they passed over the ford to bring over the sovereign's household and do what is good in his eyes. And Shimei, son of Gera, fell down before the sovereign when he passed over the Yarden, and said to the sovereign, "Do not let my master reckon crookedness to me, neither remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my master the sovereign left Jerusalem, that the sovereign should take it to heart. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned, and see, I have come today, first of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my master the sovereign." But Abishai, son of Serayahu, answered and said, "Should Shimei not be put to death for this, because he cursed the anointed of Yahu'ah?" And God said, "What have I to do with you, your sons of Tishuriyahu, that you are to be adversaries to me today? Should any man be put to death in Yashrael today? For do I not know that I am sovereign over Yashrael today?" So the sovereign said to Shimei, "You do not die." And the sovereign swore to him. And Mephibosheth, son of Shaul, came down to meet the sovereign. And he had not attended to his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his garments, from the day the sovereign went away until he came back in peace. And it came to be, when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the sovereign, that the sovereign said to him, "Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth?" And he answered, "My master, O sovereign, my servant, deceived me. For your servant said, I am saddling a donkey for myself to ride on it and go to the sovereign, because your servant is lame. And he spoke slander against your servant to my master the sovereign. But my master the sovereign is a messenger of Yahu'ah. Therefore do what is good in your eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my master the sovereign. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore what right have I still to cry out any more to the sovereign?" Then the sovereign said to him, "Why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said, you and Seba share the land." And Mephibosheth said to the sovereign, "Rather let him take it all, since my master the sovereign has come back in peace to his own house." And Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim and passed over the Jordan with the sovereign to send him on his way over the Jordan. And Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he has sustained the sovereign while he was dwelling at Mahanaim, for he was a very rich man. And the sovereign said to Barzillai, "Pass over with me, and I shall provide for you with me in Jerusalem." But Barzillai said to the sovereign, "How many are the days of my life, that I should go up with the sovereign to Jerusalem? I am now 80 years old. Do I discern between the good and evil? Does your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Do I still hear the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden to my master the sovereign? Your servant would only pass over the Jordan with the sovereign for a short distance. And why should the sovereign repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant turn back again to die in my own city, near the burial site of my father and mother. But here is your servant Kimham. Let him pass over with my master the sovereign, and do for him what is good in your eyes." And the sovereign answered, "Kimham is passing over with me, and let me do for him what is good in your eyes. Now, whatever you choose of me, I do for you." Then all the people went over the Jordan, and when the sovereign had passed over the Jordan, kissed Bezalel and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. And the sovereign passed over Gilgal, and Kimham passed over with him. And all the people of Yahudah brought the sovereign over, and also half the people of Yashrael. And see, all the men of Yashrael were coming to the sovereign. And they said to the sovereign, "Why have our brothers, the men of Yahudah, stolen you away and brought the sovereign and his household and all Adad's men with him over the Jordan?" And all the men of Yahudah answered the men of Yashrael, "Because the sovereign is our relative. And why are you displeased over this matter? Have we all at all eaten at the sovereign's cost? Or has he given us any gift?" And the men of Yashrael answered the men of Yahudah and said, "We have 10 parts in the sovereign, and in Dod 2. We have more than you. Why then do you despise us? Was it not our advice first to bring back our sovereign? But the words of the men of Yahudah were harsher than the words of the men of Yashrael." Chapter 20. And there came to be a man of Belial, whose name was Sheba, son of Becheri, a Benjamite. And he blew with the shofar and said, "We have no part in Dod, nor do we have inheritance in the son of Ishai. Each one to his tents, O Yashrael." Then all the men of Yashrael deserted Dod to follow Sheba, the son of Bechri. But the men of Yahudah, from the Jordan as far as Jerusalem, clung to their sovereign. And Dod came to his house at Jerusalem. And the sovereign took the 10 women, his concubine, whom he had left to look after the house, and put them in a protected house, and supported them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up to the day of their death, living in widowhood. And the sovereign said to Amasa, "Call the men of Yahudah for me within 3 days, and be present here yourself." And Amasa went to call the men of Yahudah, but he delayed longer than the appointed time which Dod had appointed him. And Dod said to Abishai, "Now Sheba, son of Bechri, is going to do us more evil than Absalom. Take the servants of your master and pursue them, lest he find for himself walled cities and escape us." Then the men of Joab went after him with the Kerethites, and the Pelishites, and all the mighty men. And they went out of Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. When they were near the large stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa came before them, and Joab was dressed in battle armor, and on it was a girdle with a sword fastened to its sheath and at his hips. And as he went forward, it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, "Peace, my brother." And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa was not on guard against the sword in Joab's hand, and he struck him with it in the stomach, and his inward parts poured out on the ground. And he did not strike him again, and he died. Then Joab and Abishai his brother pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. And a man, one of Joab's men, stood beside him and said, "Whoever is well pleased with Joab, and whoever is for Dod, let him follow Joab." And Amasa was rolling in his blood in the middle of the highway. And the man saw that all the people stood still, so he moved Amasa from the highway to the field and threw a garment over him. And when he saw that everyone who came upon him halted, when he was removed from the highway, all the men passed on after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. And he passed over through all the tribes of Yashrael to Abel in Beth Maacah, and to all the Berites. And they were assembled and went after him too. And they went and besieged him in Abel of Beth Maacah, and they cast up a siege mound against the city, and it stood in a rampart, and all the people who were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen, please say to Joab, 'Come nearby so that I speak to you.' And he came near to her, and the woman said, 'Are you Joab?' And he answered, 'I am.' Then she said to him, 'Listen to the words of your female servant.' And he answered, 'I am listening.' Then she spoke, saying, 'In former times they often spoke, saying, Let them inquire of Abel.' And so they ended the matter. I am of the peaceable and trustworthy ones in Yashrael. You seek to destroy a city and a mother in Yashrael. Why do you swallow up the inheritance of Yahu'ah?' And Joab answered and said, 'Far be it for me to swallow up or to destroy. That is not the case, but a man from the mountains of Ephraim, Sheba, son of Bichri by name, has raised his hand against the sovereign, against Dod. Hand him over, him alone, and I withdraw from the city.' And the woman said to Joab, 'Look, his head is going to be thrown to you over the wall.' So the woman in her wisdom went to all the people, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. Then he blew the shofar, and they dispersed from the city, each one to his tent, and Joab returned to the sovereign at Jerusalem. Now Joab was over all the army of Yashrael, and Bani Yahu, son of Yahu'ah, was over all the Ketherites and the Pelethites, and Adoram was over the compulsory labor, and Jehoshaphat, son of Elihud, was recorder. And Shua was scribe, and Zadok and Abiathar were the priest, and Ira the Yerite was priest to Dod.